Celebritress YouTube channel. Today's class will be learning how to make this beautiful shoulder pleated blouse. It's an overlap blouse and it has this beautiful puff sleeve as we have seen. It's a very simple tutorial and it's beginner friendly. If this is something you like to learn, kindly stay tuned till the end of this tutorial. Thank you. Okay, so for this tutorial we're going to be using this single pattern to cut the front and back, but in the case of the front it has an overlap. So for the overlap allowance I'm using 4 inches. Okay, so now so that I can cut the back and front together, you can see I have folded in the overlap for the front. So I'm going to draft the back pattern and cut out on my fabric before modifying it for the front pattern. So the shoulder I'm working with is 14 inches, divided by 2 is 7. So here, and there is no zipper at the back, so there's no need for a zipper allowance. Here my neckline is 3 inches, that's my neck depth, my neck width, and here I'm going to go down by 1 inch for my shoulder slope. The armhole that I'm working with is 8 inches and my waist is 17 inches, so I'll make it 18 inches because of hemming allowance. Okay, so that is all the measurements that I am going to be working with. I'll just make them into a straight line and we'll get to it. So this is just the regular basic bodies that we draft normally, so there's no big deal to this. So for the back neckline, the back neckline is going to be 1 inch, and then using my curved ruler I'm going to connect that like this. Okay, and then for my bust, the bust I'm working with is 38 inches. 38 divided by 4 is 9.5, and then I'm going to be adding 1.5 inch for my seam allowance. And here, using my curved ruler, I'm going to draw out my armhole. This is more like a freehand cutting. Okay, for my waistline, depending on how you want your waist to be, it can be fitted or it can be loose. You want it loose, you just what you have here on your waistline, you just on your bust, you just use the same thing for your waistline. But for me, my waist is actually 30 divided by 4 is 7.5, so you can leave it at 7.5 inches, or you just add 1 inch and make it 8.5. Then I'm going to add the allowance as well. There's no waist dart for this, so I'm just going to connect it like this. Then I'll cut out this pattern, cut it on my fabric before I modify this for my front. So my pattern is cut out now, as you can see, and I just placed it on my fabric to cut out my back. I placed it on fold so that by the time you cut it out, this is what you're going to have. So I'll set this aside now and then work on the front. So to work on the front, I'm going to bring out my overlap allowance like this. Then after bringing out my overlap allowance on my center front, which is the line that you see here, the overlap allowance is 4 inches like I mentioned earlier, as you can see. So here you're going to measure the depth of your neckline. Remember, we've already gone down by 1 inch for the back, so from there I'll measure how deep I want the neckline to be. It's pretty deep, so I think 10 to 11 inches is fine for me. So if you're working with 11 inches, have something like this. Yours may not be this deep, totally up to you. So from there I'm going to connect to my neck depth, which is this, and then from there I'm going to connect to my overlap allowance as well, which is this. So this is the shape that I have. Now I'm going to cut out my front neckline as well. So this pattern has a shoulder pleat. Okay, it's pleated on the shoulder for the front bodies. So to get the shoulder pleat, I'm going to be working with a method called slash and spread. Okay, so now this pleat is only on the shoulder. If you look at the waistline of this dress, the waistline remains the same. There is no pleat on the waistline area, so we're going to be cutting it in such a way that we're going to have pleats on the shoulder, but it's not going to affect the waistline of our dress. Okay, so like I was explaining, you can see that on the shoulder area you can see the pleats that we have there on the shoulder, but the waistline does not have any pleats. So I hope you can see this clearly. Okay, so this is the shoulder I was talking about. It has 2 pleats, while we do not have any pleats on the waistline area. So to get that, we're going to be working with slash and spread. So for the 2 pleats that we have there, you can just measure like 1.5 inches on your shoulder. Remember, it's 7 inches and we've taken out 3, so we are left with 4 inches for our shoulder. So I'm just going to eyeball it and just mark those 2 points. Then after marking the 2 points, I'm going to connect it downwards like this to the hem of the blouse. Okay, I keep calling dress, it's a blouse. So I have it like this. So after having those two lines, I'm going to come in with my scissors and then cut. Okay, remember this is the part where we don't want to have pleats, so I'm going to cut from the shoulder all the way to the hem. So if you want to have pleats on your hem, what you just need to do is to cut through completely and then you separate it. But in this case, I just want to have my pleats on my shoulder. That's why I'm just cutting to the tip. Then by the time I spread it, I'm just going to introduce more volume to my shoulder while my waist remains the same. You can see, so the volume is just going to be on this shoulder part. So after cutting it like this, you spread. So I'm going to bring in a fresh paper and spread it on it. Okay, so this is a fresh paper now. I hope you can see it well. Then you can just hold the first part with your tape so that it can stand in place before you start to spread it. So I'm holding it now from each of my lines. So this is the first one. I'm going to measure 2 to 3 inches for my spread, depending on how wide you want to spread this. I'm measuring 3 inches apart. So once I have 3 inches, I'm going to bring in my tape again and then use it to hold it down. Then for the second thread, I'm going to use the same 3 inches. So I'm going to bring in my tape now and measure 3 inches and then place it like that. So we have 2 spreads there for our 2 pleats. And then I'm just going to hold this down on the waistline as well, so that I can cut out this pattern. I hope you can see this well. So this is what we have now. So what I'm just doing is holding all of them down because I don't want them to shift. And then you're going to cut out this new pattern that we have. So to cut this out now, you may want to blend in your shoulder. So using my scissors, because this is a sellotape, it may not be so obvious. Okay, so I'm trying to blend in this. Okay, and then I'm going to maintain the same. The sellotape keeps cleaning up, so I'm going to maintain the same armhole that I have, the same side, the same waistline and the same neckline. So I'll cut this out now and then we'll continue. Okay, so I'm gonna have to cut it out. You can see the shape that I put here, because by the time I split it, I may have a shortage. So even before you cut it on your pattern, you can decide to close it up like this and then cut, so that you're not going to be having any shortage. So I just made this angle here so that by the time I finish and I want to pleat it, I'm not going to be having any shortage on my shoulder. So what you just need to do now is to cut this on your fabric. So I'm going to cut 2 of these, one for each side of our front. Okay, and then after cutting it, what we're just going to do now is to place this first. Remember, we have 2 pleats, so this is the first and this is going to be the second, and once you pleat it, it's going to go back to your normal shoulder measurement. Okay, so I've laid this on my fabric now and I'm going to cut it out. So depending on what you want, remember by the time you cut it, this center front, this neckline area is going to be rough. Okay, so you can actually cut your facing with this together with it, or you just cut your facing separately when you finish cutting. If you want to cut your facing together with it, you can just measure like 2.5 inches or between 2 to 3 inches basically from that point now, and then you connect everything together, then you cut all at once. So it's totally up to you and the method you wish to use for. So if you're cutting your facing, just like I marked it like that, I'm going to go in with my scissors and then cut this out. So after cutting it out, you're going to cut out your shoulder, your waistline, and then you just notch that area where your facing starts, which is here. So that's how you do that. Then you cut your facing for your back as well. So I've cut this out now. The next thing is to place our notches where necessary. So I'm going to notch here where my facing is going to start, and then I'm going to notch where my pleats are going to be placed. Okay, so from here to here you're going to notch it, from here to here again you're going to notch it, or you can just place it directly with your pattern like this. But I'm just going to place a notch there so that I'll know where to place, or that angle that you created there can also guide you on where to pleat. Okay, but I'm just notching it so that it will be clear to me. So after placing your notches, once you want to pleat, you pleat from one notch to the other. So now I can remove my pattern. Now this is what I have. So the first notch is for my, if you separate it, this is what you have. So the first notch is for my facing. So I'm just going to fold in the facing like this. You can see that now it's going to be neat. You can go ahead and iron down your facing. So after folding in your facing, I'm going to hold that with a pin, and then I'm going to start to pleat. So this is my first pleat from one notch to the other, and then this is my second pleat from one notch to the other. So those are the two pleats we have on the shoulder. And once we make that pleat, you can see the pleats that we have on our bodies, two pleats, and then you can see that our waistline now remains the same. So I'll go ahead now and hold my pleats with my pin, and then I'll do the same thing for the other side. So the facing for the back is also cut. So what you just need to do now is to bring in your back, and then you place your facing and your main fabric right side facing right side. You go ahead and sew it and then turn. So your facing is just like a small lining. So you can see we just mirrored exactly what we have on our neckline, and then we just cut a shorter fashion so that we can use it to turn the neckline neatly. So I'll go ahead and do this on my sewing machine, turn the neckline. I'll also place this to my shoulder. Remember, we're going to join this shoulder back to our back shoulder, which is 4 inches. So we have to place it back to the normal shoulder, and then I'm going to sew it on the sides as well. So I'm going ahead to pin this. As you can see, I've pleated my two pleats. So after folding it in, I have this excess on my overlap, so I'm just going to trim it off like that. So the excess is because the V that we created is not a straight one. So by the time we folded it in, it just gave us that excess. So this is what it looks like by the time you overlap it. This is what you're going to have. So for the back as well, I've gone ahead to pin my facing to it. So I'm just going to sew it and turn it out. Then after doing that, I'm going to place it right side facing right side. Then I'm going to sew it on the shoulder. You can see our shoulder is exactly the same now. I'm going to sew it on the shoulder and also on the sides before we create our sleeve. Okay, so I've gone ahead to sew them together. You can see now that the shoulder is joined as well as the side. So I just want to quickly explain something. So because remember when I was making my neck depth, I went down as low as 11 inches for the front neck depth, but I kind of changed my mind towards that because I don't want to reveal so much. That was why I cut my facing together. Okay, so by the time I folded in the facing, it's kind of helped me drag it to around 8 inches, which is moderate for me. But if you want to maintain that deep neckline that we worked with in the front, don't cut your facing together, because it's not the slanting that we did is not a straight slant. It's kind of bent. So you just cut your facing separately, just like we cut the facing for the front. Okay, because now that I've cut my facing together, it's going to drag it to around 8 inches for me. So you can check that by just folding the overlap on top of each other. So by the time you fold it on top of each other, you can, I notched my center front, so you just match the notches that you have on your center front and just arrange your fold. So this is what the neckline looks like now. Measuring it now, I have around 9 inches or so, which is fine for me. So you just go ahead and sew this down. So now we move straight to the sleeve. For the sleeve, you can measure around your sleeve to know the measurement that you have. I have 9 inches here, so I'm going to be using freehand. Like I said, I'm going to be using freehand, but you can also use the slash and spread that we used for the bodies for the sleeve as well. So I want to simplify this as much as possible. We measured 9 inches on our sleeve, so depending on how puffy you want it to be, you can multiply that 9 inches by 2 or 3 on fold. So multiplying it by 2 on fold, you're going to have 18 inches, but I have around 15 inches or thereabouts here, and I'm going to stick to that because this is a tutorial. But if you want yours to be really full, you should multiply by 2 or 3 inches. So and that measurement should be on fold. You can see that I have folded this. Now I have it folded into 4 because I'm cutting the two sides together. So you have to make sure that your measurement is on fold. So if you work with 9 by 2, that's going to be 18, and by the time you open it out, you're going to have around 38 inches. So this is what we have now. And then the length that I want, the actual length that I want for my sleeve is around 8 inches. So for it to be really big, I'm adding around 4 to 5 inches to the length. So that's what I have. So now to create my calf's height, on this open part, remember it's on fold, this is the folded part. On this open part, I'm going to go down by 4 to 5 inches for my calf height, and then from there you should use a chalk. Well, I'm just doing this so that we can see it well. My chalk is same color with this fabric. So from there now, I'm just going to use my free hand to create like an arm hook up there. So once I have it like that, I'm going to bring in my scissors and then cut this out. So the sleeve is very simple because we are cutting it with our free hand. So now after cutting it out, I'm going to open up this side. So this is what the sleeve looks like. So you just need to notch it at the midpoint here. So when you open out your sleeve, this is what you have. It should be bigger than this, but I just left it like this because this is a tutorial. So now we're going to use an elastic to gather this back to our normal round sleeve. So to do that, I'm going to fold this in on the sewing machine, then sew it close so that I can pass my elastic. I'll do the same thing for the other side. Then on the upper part, I'm going to pleat everything back to my actual sleeve measurement, round sleeve measure, round armhole measurement, before sewing this to my sleeve. So the sleeve is fixed now, and you can see that I have very small pleats around my sleeve because I use very small measurements. So please just multiply yours by 2.5 or 3 inches preferably, so that I can have something really big. So I've already created my channel as well, and then I'm going to be passing my elastic to gather it back to my actual round sleeve measurement. So this is what I have now, and then I've also closed up my overlap. So like I explained, because I cut out my facing, so I'm going to use my hemming glue to hold this facing together. So because I cut out my facing together with my body, that's kind of rearranged the neck depth for me, and I'm going to explain that to us so that we can understand it better. Okay, so like I was saying earlier, remember this was how we drafted it, and then by the time we pushed out our allowance, we went down by 11 inches for the neck depth. Okay, so let's just assume 11 inches is around here. So after that, what we did was connect from the neck to the 11 inches before we connected it to our overlap. So which means that you can see that the line is not straight, it's kind of sharp here. So if you want to maintain this 11 inches depth, what you just need to do is cut out your neckline, and you cut out a facing separately, because once you cut out your facing together with it, this is what it's going to give you. Instead of it being sharp like this, it's just going to make it straight down to your neck like this. And once it's straight down to your neck, you can see where your depth have shifted to now. It's just going to control it. Once you fold it, it's going to control it, because it's not going to mirror what you have here, which is not so straight. You can see what we have here. So if you want to maintain this actual neckline, what you just need to do is cut this out, and then you cut your facing separately so that you can have exactly this. I hope you understand that. But once you cut your facing together just like I did, this is what it's going to give it for you. It gives to you. It's just going to control it to a straight line like this. And once you have your straight line, instead of having what you have here, which was 11 inches, you can see what I have, you're going to be having around 8 inches at your center front line. Remember, this is where we have our center front, this crease line. The leftover that we have here is for the overlap. So that is what I just thought to explain to us, so that we will not be confused. So now I'll take the dress to the mannequin so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the mannequin. You can see my sleeve, it's not so full, and I just explained to us, if you want yours to be fuller, how you can go about it. These are the 2 pleats that we created on the shoulder, and this is the neck depth that I came with, that I finally decided on, because the 11 inches is going to be around here and I don't want it that deep. So this is what I have. This is the full view of the blouse. So here on the waist area, you can either turn it in with your bias and hem it neatly, or you can also use a band. Okay, you can fix a band there. So if you want it to be your exact waist measurement, just like I have it here, you need to open it on the side seam and fix a zipper so that your bust can go through it. But if you don't want it to be your exact waist, you can just leave it as your bust measurement. Then you use your skirt or your trouser to just give it the fitting that you want, or you pass an elastic there. Whichever one you want is fine. So this is what the full view of the blouse looks like, and you can see how beautiful and simple it is to make this lovely blouse. If you enjoyed this tutorial, kindly like, comment and subscribe to our channel if you haven't, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.